Common to hear when people talk about socialism that socialism and communism have nothing to do with each other. But what's really the case? To learn more about this, the history of communism, the goals of communism, and how these relate to the socialist idea, we've invited to speak with us Paul Kengor. He's a professor at Grove City College and the author of the book, The Devil and Karl Marx. Let's jump into it now. Paul Kengor, it's great having you on Crossroads.
Hey, Josh, it's great to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, so a lot of people would say that current politics, current, say, culture movements have nothing to do with communism. How do you see communism manifesting in the world right now?
Okay, this is a perfect question. I happen to have this page open, all right? The end of the Communist Manifesto. Everyone remembers the lines, workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains, right? But in the last paragraph, the last two paragraphs, there's these two really crucial lines. Okay, and everybody forgets this, all right? By the way, they also call for, quote, communism abolishes the present state of things, said Marx and Engels, right? Could you imagine that? But imagine one of my students turning in a paper, right? In this paper, I will argue for the abolition of the present state of things, right? Oh, is that all, right? But Marx and Engels write this. They, the communists, openly declare that their ends can be attained only by, are you ready, the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The communists declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Now, for people who say communism is really a pretty good idea if you just read the book, really, right? And they don't. Marx and Engels aren't even careful or nuanced enough to say, you know, the things in society that are bad ought to be changed. In some cases, forcibly overthrown. They're calling for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Is there anything more radical than that? No. And then they say this. This is in direct answer to your question. Communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. Communists everywhere support every social movement against the existing political social order of things. So this is key. When you think to yourself, why are the communists at that protest, right? What are they doing there? Why are they tearing down that statue? Well, that's got nothing to do with redistribution of wealth. Why are they behind these sex gender people? Marx and Engels didn't care about that. Well, if it has to do with supporting a revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things, they'll be there to burn down the house, right? They'll be there with their can of gasoline, with the matches. It's all about takedown, about tearing things down. This is a very radical, destructive ideology. So just when you think that it couldn't have anything to do with tearing down a statue of Junipero Serra or Christopher Columbus, right? Communists would be like, no, this is about tearing down the existing social and political order of things. We'll be there, baby, right? We'll be there. So, that's a connection. And I wrote a piece on this for the Epoch Times, I think a few months ago, on the connection between communists and the sort of statue movement, right? Just as the statue movement wanted to tear down, so did Karl Marx.
So, of course, he wrote this book, The Devil and Karl Marx, and a lot of people would see that headline and be like, is this some religious thing? What's this guy getting at? But when you read it, of course, it's a very academic, well thought out, very well sourced book. I'm curious, for people not familiar with how these things would relate in any way possible, what would you tell them?
Well, good question, and thank you. Of course, Karl Marx wrote about religion. I mean, he had his famous Opiate of the Masses essay, where he said that religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of heartless conditions, the soul of a soulless world. It is the opiate of the masses. And he also said there too, Josh, everybody forgets about this, but he said in there that the criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism. And this was a guy who was all about criticism. In fact, he called for, in one letter to a friend, Arnold Rouge, the ruthless criticism of everything that exists, right? The ruthless criticism of everything that exists. So for Marx, for his project, taking down religion was all about what he wanted to do, the abolition of all religion, all morality. And Marx also said communism begins where atheism begins. So that's kind of the general religious element. And I think what a lot of people don't know, actually what I know a lot of people don't know, is that Marx wrote about the devil. Marx wrote some genuinely chilling, frightening stuff, poems about the devil, plays about the devil. And in some of these cases, it's hard to tell if he's just writing about this in a way that, a writer would write anything, or in his case, if it reflects what he personally believes, if it's autobiographical. I open up the book with a stanza from one of the poems where he says that, in fact, I got the exact quote here. I'll read two of them to you because they're both quite chilling, and I think I want to get them word for word so people don't accuse me of misrepresenting. Thus heaven I've forfeited, I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell. Now, he wrote that in 1837, and I think that, Josh, is partly autobiographical because his soul was once true to God. I won't say it was chosen for hell, but it was once true to God. And the other one from 1841, this is called The Player. Look now, my blood dark sword shall stab unerringly within thy soul. The hellish vapors rise and fill the brain, till I go mad and my heart is utterly changed. See the sword, the prince of darkness sold it to me. For he beats the time and gives the signs. Ever more boldly I play the dance of death.
Now, Paul, a lot of people, of course, would talk about the, say, communist movements that exist in the world right now. And a lot of these movements would deny that they have anything to do with Marx. Even though if you go in history, you'd say, okay, they're kind of based on critical race theory, they're kind of based on these different offshoots. A lot of them would deny that they have anything to do with communism. Now, in terms of what these people are carrying out, in terms of where it's going, where would you say the world is heading right now as these different movements are being carried out?
Well, it's a good question. And communism has become so redefined, a lot like socialism, democratic socialism. In fact, a lot of democratic socialists, I find when I talk to these people that a lot of them are really just social democrats, right? They get so much of this language confused. They don't even understand it. A lot of it's not taught very well, if it's taught at all, and people really don't understand it. But around the world, I mean, if you really want to look at communism applied by the book, it's probably countries like Cuba, North Korea. China's a big problem, but China's not abolishing all private property, right? I mean, North Korea has, Cuba has. And there's one thing you hear all the time is from communists and socialism, oh, communism's a pretty good idea if you just read the book. It hasn't been applied correctly yet, right? It's like, well, when is it going to be applied correctly? Can you tell me? And Marx and Engels, if you actually read the manifesto, there's a 10-point plan. And it calls for things like abolition of property, abolition of all right of inheritance, which is something that I like to point out to young people, right? Someone sitting in a Starbucks sucking on a grande skim latte with an iPhone and a laptop. Hey, how would you like to not have your right to inheritance? All of your parents' money has to go to the government or wherever. Or one of the lines in the 10-point plan, which calls for a more equal distribution of the population across the countryside, where they seek to redistribute not just your money and your property, but you. They wanted a more equal distribution of people. So the forcible relocation of people, that happened in China, that happened in Cambodia, that has happened in other different countries around the world. So, for people that want to do, some form of collectivization, wealth redistribution, helping the poor, whatever, fine, do that through your social democracy, right? Follow some Western European country. But I could tell you, communism is not your answer. I mean, that is an utterly destructive ideology that doesn't work. And if you don't understand why, you need to read some books. Read the Communist Manifesto.